Today we're going to be taking a look at 12 of the biggest robberies throughout AFL history. Some of these moments are due to controversial score reviews, dodgy umpiring calls, as well as individual awards that were seemingly undeserved given the consequences. Starting off in today's video, we'll have a look at the Josh Jenkins late goal in the 2018 showdown, which many believe to have hit the post. Now this one wasn't as clear cut as some of the others that will be shown on this list later on. However, looking at the replays and the angles, it does appear that Jenkins' snap kick deviates the post, and even in a post-match interview, Jenkins himself believed that he thought the ball had hit the post. The decision was reviewed for 23 seconds, with the umpires believing there was not enough evidence to overturn the original call, which is the goal. With a lack of angles shown, it is still impossible to know for sure, and even if it 100% did hit the post, you could still argue that the Crows could have still found a way to score another goal with the amount of time left. We fast forward 5 years and we have another decision that was just as decisive, this time between the Blues and the D's in 2023. Another instance where the lack of goal line technology has possibly resulted in the wrong decision being made, which in this case was the call to Christian Petrarca's last minute goal, a touch behind. The soft call was initially that Caleb Marchbank touched the footy, but again, when looking at the angles, it really is impossible to tell for sure, particularly considering the majority of the fans believe that the result should have been a goal.
The technology isn't good enough that if this may well cost Melbourne, a home final.
That is the best we've got with technology, then get rid of it and just go back to the umpire's call.
This further proves the need to invest more in vastly improving the goal line technology so that we don't have to guess the final decision if this was in fact a goal. If this was in fact a goal, then Melbourne would be playing in a home final. But let me know, just like the last decision, if you believe that this was a goal or not. Next up, we have the moment that inspired me to make this video, and the most recent one on the list, of course being the absolutely disgraceful Ben Keays missed goal, which was deemed a behind. Now, whilst the previous two weren't decisive, this one was as clear as day, and for those who don't already know, the Crows needed to win this game to keep their final chance alive, and whilst being down by 2 points with 80 seconds to go, Ben Keays believed he had kicked the match winner, as shown by the celebrations he had with his teammates. The goal umpire made the wrong decision, believing that the ball hit the post, and for some stupid reason, they didn't go upstairs with the score review.
Absolutely, the Crows were robbed. Right in front of me. Right in front.
As a result, the AFL was forced to apologise, and the goal umpire was stepped down for the end of the season.
I want to say conclusively that if the decision had been reviewed, it would have been overturned, and it would have been a goal.
As if the Crows would have won, they would have made the finals ahead of the Swans, who instead got the points that day. Another final minute decision that ultimately cost the side the game was a terrible non-holding the ball call between Geelong and Brisbane in 2021. With under 30 seconds to go, Mark Blicavs unsuccessfully tried to evade the Zach Bailey tackle.
Did he handball it? No! That's as clean a tackle as you can get.
Anyone with a clear set of eyes could have seen that decision should have been paid holding the ball, which would have given Zach Bailey the opportunity to win the game after the siren. With him being only like 8 metres from goal, he would have most likely slotted it, winning the Lions the game, but instead they lost the game by a point due to this error. All footy pundits unanimously agree that this should have been paid a free kick, with even the AFL themselves admitting that the call was a howler and that Brisbane were unfairly penalised. In the same year, however, being affected on the other side of the scale, we saw a missed Jeremy Cameron mark in the dying seconds of Sydney and Geelong in 2021.
At his new club.
It's not 15, I think he said.
The umpire deemed the ball as not going 15, however when looking back at the replay, you could tell that the ball probably did make the journey. Cameron would have almost certainly slotted the goal as well, had he had this shot after the siren.
What did you think? Did you think it travelled the 15 metres?
Well, I've looked at the vision, and it's clear it did, but it's a different perspective for the umpire. He can't go back and replay the vision.
Funnily enough though, many fans believe that this missed call was karma from the Brisbane game that we just discussed earlier. However, it isn't just the teams that have been subsequently robbed, but also individual players that have been robbed of certain awards. For example, when we look at 2011, Andrew Walker's famous hanger on Essendon's Jake Carlisle didn't even receive the award. But do you know which one did? It was Andrew Cracker's mark against Adelaide.
Damage has Dale Thomas.
Whilst obviously still being a good grab when you just look at the two marks side to side, it's quite clear that Walker's was just more spectacular. Cracker's wasn't the highest, didn't have the most hang time, and was just a boring landing. Ironically enough, the AFL recognised Walker's mark as Mark of the Decade, which clearly suggests that he should have won Mark of the Year in 2011 over Cracker's. I mean, just have a look at the comment section of any video on Cracker's mark. Another player who was rightfully robbed of Mark of the Year award was Jeremy Howe.
Territory Jeremy Howe.
when it was instead awarded to Joe Danaher in 2017. Again, with Danaher's mark, there was nothing particularly bad about it. It was just the fact that Howe's was simply just better in all aspects really. He simply flew way higher with a remarkable leap, which made it even better that it was taken during the Queen's birthday clash. Danaher's grab received 52% of the fan votes compared to Howe's 40%, which was a shock to almost everyone. Treloar described the decision as the biggest robbery in the history of any sport, whereas Eddie McGuire was just as furious, labelling it as a stain and the need for an overhaul of the voting system. Even Jeremy Howe himself was as shocked as anyone when the award was called.
Joe Danaher.
Another player who was robbed of an award was Corey McKernan on the 1996 Brownlow medal. Michael Voss and James Hird were the two actual winners of the award with 21 votes each. However, McKernan also received 21 votes. The only problem was that he was ineligible due to being suspended during the season. Now obviously, since the Brownlow prohibits any suspended player from winning the Brownlow, it doesn't really seem like much of an issue until you see the incident which got him suspended in the first place. In a marking contest, a player goes down and it seems as if though McKernan accidentally knees John Burns in the back of the head when falling down. Considering the fact it did seem accidental in the contest, as well as the fact that in 1996 the AFL were far less strict with what certain actions deemed suspendable. To make matters worse as well for McKernan, he wasn't invited to the Brownlow count and was forced to watch him get the equal most votes, only not to win it due to a suspension. Let me know what you do believe about this one as well, and if you do believe that this suspension wasn't really right and that Corey McKernan should have won the Brownlow that year as well. Chris Grant was also a player who was robbed of a Brownlow, but unlike McKernan, he solely led the vote count at the end of the night in 1997, only for it to be awarded to Robert Harvey instead. The incident that was deemed a suspension was a late hit on Nick Holland, however that wasn't even reported by the umpires but instead an AFL official shortly after. Now whilst his intentions were to hit the footy, this would most likely be deemed a suspension in today's game. However, when you look at it back in 1997, the rules were just far less strict and incidents like that have been let go plenty of times as it was just seen as being part of the game. But what about in 2008 between North Melbourne and Sydney, where both teams played off in a draw in controversial fashion? The reason why that was the case was because Sydney fielded 19 men on the ground in the very late stages of the match, and North should have been awarded a free kick and 50-metre penalty. Darren Jolly, the player who was supposed to be off for Jesse White, was involved in a handball chain that set up the match tying behind, which occurred when there were 19 men on the field. At the time of the event, all the players were unaware, as the only way a team could be punished is for the opposing captain to do a head count. However, in round 9 of that year, the rule was later changed so that interchange stewards could alert the umpires if the infringement had been made. North Melbourne, in a way, you could say were robbed accordingly and probably would have went on to win that game if the new rule changes were put in place at that time. Next up, we have one of the most poorly umpired games in the history of the AFL, which was the infamous clash between Adelaide and Fitzroy during the 1991 season. Heading into this season, the Crows were the newly expansion side of the competition. Whilst at the time Fitzroy were in quite a difficult position financially, it seemed as if though Fitzroy were going to get up in quite a low scoring game. However, during the final quarter, multiple questionable free kicks were awarded to the home team. However, this sort of seemed like the norm as Adelaide were typically favoured and helped by the umpires because the AFL wanted them to do well. When all hope seemed lost for the Crows, with them being down by 9 with a minute to go, the umpires ramped it up a notch and paid 3 of the most ridiculous free kicks you'll ever see to practically hand Adelaide a free win. I think these words by Peter McKenna perfectly summarise the events that just unfolded.
Make the distance. Oh, he's kicked it. They've stolen it. It's a goal. Absolute murder. Absolute murder. Unbelievable thing.
Now speaking of dreadful umpiring, we take a look at the Anzac Day clash between Collingwood and Essendon in 2019. We could argue that the umpires influenced the result of that clash, robbing Essendon of a win. Throughout the game, the umpiring seemed to favour the Magpies, starting with a missed hold on the ball call on Josh Thomas in the second quarter, and then an even worse missed call on Darcy Moore in the third.
That's ball. Yeah, no way. That was.
However, the final quarter is where it was at its worst, with a further 2 missed hold on the ball decisions, which seemed so obvious to be paid that even the plays from both sides stopped, assuming that the decision was going to be paid. It was then topped off in the final minute when Jaden Stevenson didn't get pinned for holding the ball, only for Callum Brand to gain a push in the back free kick directly after. The Pies then went on to win the game by 4 points, but if the umpiring wasn't as one-sided, who knows if the same result would have occurred. Understandably, Bombers fans were furious post-game, but what was arguably just as worse was the fact that umpire Sean Ryan defended a majority of these calls, claiming that these were all the correct decisions.
On the review, when they replay it, you can clearly see that he does get a handball.
Well, that'll wrap things up for this video. Let me know which moment in the video frustrated you most out of any, or which moments that I did discuss do you believe that the right decision was made and that no team got robbed. Of course, there are more instances where teams and players got robbed in certain ways, so let me know if there are any in the comments that I missed. Feel free to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, particularly during the off season, and I'll see you guys very soon in the next one.